Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here coming to you from Colorado. Today is part 2 of our Venezuela coverage because a lot of you have been asking the obvious follow-up question, Maduro's gone, so what happens now? The short answer is nothing good. The longer answer involves a country with no functional leadership, no food security, a collapsed economy, and really no path forward that doesn't involve significant suffering. I wish I had better news, but let's walk through the scenarios. First, let's talk about who's left in charge. The answer is basically nobody. Maduro was selected by Chavez specifically because he was loyal, not because he was competent. And Maduro followed the same playbook, surrounding himself with yes-men who were good at keeping the population under control while the looting continued. The defense minister exists, cabinet members exist, but there's no one with the political skill or institutional support to actually hold things together. This isn't like a normal country where there's a vice president or party structure ready to step in. Now, you might think the opposition could fill the vacuum. And yes, Venezuela has an opposition movement, people who've been fighting Maduro for years. The problem is they're a lot like the Democrats in the United States, meaning they can't agree on anything. They haven't held power in over 2 decades, they don't have institutional experience, and their leaders have spent more time in exile or prison than actually governing. Organizing a functional transitional government from that base is, let's call it, optimistic. So, what about the United States? Trump has said America is now in charge of Venezuelan security, but saying and doing are very different things. Right now, there are no boots on the ground beyond the Delta Force team that grabbed Maduro and left. Actually, occupying and stabilizing Venezuela would require something like 100,000 troops, a 20-year commitment, and at least $200 billion just to get the oil sector working again. Plus, there's a geographical nightmare. Coastal mountains separate Caracas from the sea, with long tunnels that would be perfect for guerrilla resistance. This would be harder than Iraq. I see no appetite for that in Washington. Which brings us to the humanitarian situation, and this is where it gets really dark. Venezuela imports roughly 80% of its food. That's not a typo. A country that used to be a food exporter now can't feed itself. With Maduro gone, with sanctions still in place, with no functional government to negotiate anything, cargo ships are not coming. The people who pilot those vessels are looking at the situation and saying, "Hell no, I'm not going there." We should expect famine conditions to restart within weeks, maybe a month at most. Remember, this isn't hypothetical. A few years ago, Venezuela went through a famine so severe that the average person lost over 20 pounds in a single year. They bounced back slightly, but only because Chevron still had some operations generating enough cash to import food. That was a band-aid on a gaping wound, and now even that fragile system is collapsing. Between 1/4 and 1/3 of Venezuelans have already fled the country. Expect that number to accelerate dramatically. Let me give you the 3 most likely scenarios for the next 6 months. Scenario 1, a regime figure, maybe the defense minister, manages to consolidate enough military support to claim power. This would essentially be Maduroism without Maduro, meaning continued dysfunction, but at least some semblance of order. Probability? Maybe 20%. The problem is nobody in that circle has demonstrated any ability to lead. Scenario 2, the opposition somehow comes together, forms a transitional government, and reaches out to Washington for support. The U.S. lifts sanctions, food starts flowing, and Venezuela begins a long, painful recovery. This is the optimistic scenario. Probability? I'd give it maybe 15%. It requires the opposition to suddenly develop organizational skills they've never shown, and the U.S. to commit resources it seems unwilling to provide. Scenario 3, and this is the most likely one at maybe 65% probability. Venezuela fragments. Different factions control different areas, the military splits, criminal organizations fill the vacuum in some regions, and the country enters a prolonged period of low-level civil conflict. Food distribution collapses entirely in some areas. Millions more flee to Colombia, Brazil, Peru, anywhere they can walk to. This isn't state failure, it's state dissolution. I would love to be wrong on this. Venezuela has been on a downward spiral since Chavez took power in 1999, and Maduro accelerated that decline. But removing Maduro doesn't fix the underlying problems. The infrastructure is gone, the institutions are hollowed out, the educated class has fled, and the oil sector that once funded everything is a shadow of itself. There's no quick fix here, and I don't see anyone, Venezuelan or American, willing to do what's actually required. Watch for the food situation over the next few weeks. That'll tell you which scenario we're heading toward.